I knew the moment I leaned down beside him that my life was about to change forever. I felt it in the way his eyes locked onto mine before I even opened my mouth. I felt it in the way my heartbeat pulsed so loudly that I thought everyone in Rosetta's could hear it. But I still whispered the words that changed everything. Don't look back. Just pay and go. My voice shook, but my hands shook even more. I was standing so close to him that I could smell the expensive cologne he always wore when he came in. Alec Knight. The man every server feared because he was always calm, always polite, and always surrounded by men who carried danger in their eyes. Some people called him Mr. Knight. Others called him the future king of Chicago's underworld. To me, he had always been the silent man in the corner booth with the perfect suit and unreadable face. Tonight, he wasn't silent. Before I could step back, his hand closed around my wrist, firm, warm, controlling. He pulled me closer until I felt his breath against my cheek. My fingers almost dropped the leather check presenter I was holding. "What exactly did you see?" he whispered, his voice low enough that it felt like a secret sliding under my skin. I swallowed hard and forced myself not to look toward the kitchen, even though every part of me wanted to turn around and check if those men were getting closer. My name was April. I was 21, a broke art student, a waitress who worked double shifts just to keep my tuition paid. And I had never meant to get involved in anything dangerous. I had been invisible here for 3 years, just another girl in a black apron, until tonight. 3 men had walked through the back entrance wearing suits none of our staff could afford. Their jackets were tight in a way that only meant one thing. "I saw men come in through the kitchen," I whispered. "They asked for you. They're armed." His grip tightened for a second, then loosened slowly. His thumb traced a slow, deliberate circle against the inside of my wrist, a motion that made my breath catch, even though fear flooded every part of me. "You've just made yourself a problem," he said softly. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. A problem. Something dangerous. Something he needed to deal with. Then he looked at my name tag. "But you've also made yourself my responsibility." Before I could understand what that meant, glass shattered across the restaurant. People screamed. A gunshot echoed through Rosetta's, and panic exploded in every direction. I didn't even have time to gasp before Alec yanked me down under the heavy oak table. Wood splintered above us as bullets tore through the air. His body covered mine completely, shielding me as if we were something more than a waitress and a man who lived in a world I should never have stepped into. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice steady, even while the world around us fell apart. I could feel the strength in his arms as he held me against him. I could feel the tension in his chest as his men returned fire. I could smell gunpowder mixed with his cologne. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't think. Everything inside me shook, but he didn't. Not even a little. "When I move, you move," he whispered near my ear. I nodded, my whole body trembling. He counted down with 3 fingers. When he hit 0, he pulled me up with him, keeping me against his side as we ran through overturned tables and terrified customers. His men formed a protective wall around us, firing as they moved. I didn't even realize I was crying until the cold night air hit my face. A black SUV door opened, and Alec pushed me inside before sliding in after me. His driver hit the gas so hard that my head slammed back into the seat. The restaurant where I had spent 3 years of my life shrank behind us, covered in flashing lights and chaos. Alec was bleeding, a small graze on his arm, but blood still. He pressed his fingers over it casually, as if he weren't even bothered. "You have 2 choices," he said, his calm voice at odds with everything I had just lived through. "Disappear from everything you've ever known, or come with me and learn how to survive in my world." I stared at him, my breath uneven, my chest tight. My thoughts scattered. "Why would you give me a choice?" I asked. He looked at me like he could see straight through the fear I was trying so hard to hide. "Because loyalty given freely is worth more than anything," he said, "and you gave it to me without even knowing my real name." He reached over and gently wiped a spot of blood from my cheek. His touch was strangely soft, careful, almost intimate. "My name is Alec Knight," he said, "and you just saved my life." His words settled deep inside me, heavy, real, dangerous. And I knew in that moment that nothing about my life would ever be ordinary again. The lakeside mansion didn't look real when we pulled up. It rose out of the darkness like something pulled from a movie set. Tall windows glowing against the night, security guards everywhere with earpieces and steady eyes. My entire body felt stiff as Alec took my hand and walked me inside, his palm warm and certain against mine. I felt small beside him, small and out of place, but he didn't let go of my hand, not even when we stepped into a study lined with books and dark wood. An older man sat behind a desk, his sharp eyes lifting the second we entered. He looked like Alec, but older, colder, with a lifetime of power settled into his shoulders. "So this is the waitress," he said. My stomach tightened. I didn't know how to stand or where to look. I felt like I should hide my shaking hands behind my back, but I forced them still at my sides. Alec's grip on my hand tightened, pulling me a little closer. "Her name is April." "Tell me what you saw," the older man said, ignoring Alec entirely as his gaze fixed on me. I told him everything. My voice didn't break. My hands stayed steady. I didn't know where the calmness came from, but as I spoke, both men watched me with a sharpness that made my skin prickle. "You notice detail," the older man said when I finished. "Why?" "I'm an art student," I answered. "When you draw, you learn to see everything." The man, Dawn Knight, as I later learned, leaned back in his chair and nodded, as if that single explanation unlocked something important. "Get her cleaned up," he said to Alec. "We'll talk tomorrow." Quote. Alec guided me out of the study, and only when the door shut behind us did I finally exhale. He looked at me with something strange in his eyes. Not pity, not concern. Something darker, warmer, protective. "You did well," he said quietly. Later, after I showered and changed into borrowed clothes that somehow fit me perfectly, I stepped out onto a balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. The night wind cooled my skin, but it couldn't stop the heat still swirling inside me from everything that had happened. Alec joined me without knocking. "They were Pirelli men," he said, staring out at the water with his hands in his pockets. "They've been pushing into our territory." "And they wanted to kill you," I said. His eyes slid toward me. "Yes." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been clawing at me since the SUV. "Why am I still alive? Why protect me?" "I'm a waitress." Alec let out a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You're not just a waitress." "Not anymore." He came closer until the railing pressed into my back and his body blocked the wind. His gaze dropped to my face, and I felt pinned in place. "You saw things most people don't. You stayed calm when others screamed. You warned me even though you could have walked away," he said. "People like that aren't ordinary." My heart thudded hard enough to hurt. "You want to use me?" I said softly. Alec didn't deny it. "I want to offer you a choice," he said. "Work with us. Learn what we do. Be protected. Or disappear with a new identity. But either way, you can't go back to your old life." My throat tightened. My chest burned with ache. "What would I do?" I asked. "You would be my eyes and ears in places I can't go unnoticed," he said, leaning in until his breath brushed my cheek. "You would be someone I trust." His face was close enough to touch, close enough to feel the heat radiating from him. I didn't know whether to step away or lean into it. "And if I say no?" I asked. "Then I let you go," he said quietly. "But not tonight. Tonight you stay safe." I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying everything. The gunshots, the panic, the way Alec shielded me with his entire body, the way he looked at me on the balcony like I was someone important. By morning, the mansion was alive with movement. Men with files, women carrying tablets, phones ringing, conversations happening in hushed tones. And in the center of it all was Alec, giving orders like someone born to be obeyed. When he called me into the study, my heart hammered again. The walls were covered in maps of Chicago, each area marked with colors I didn't understand yet. Alec stood beside me as I studied them, his shoulder brushing mine lightly. "This is our world," he said. "If you stay, you need to understand it." His hand lowered to my lower back, steady and warm. I should have stepped away, I didn't. He began pointing out territories, enemies, alliances. I tried to memorize everything, and he watched me with a look that made my breath quicken. "You learn fast," he said. I felt his eyes on me more than the maps, felt the weight of something building between us, strong, dangerous, pulling me in. That night, he took me with him to a night-owned nightclub. I wore a dress one of the mansion assistants had chosen for me. Elegant, simple. It made me look like someone who belonged at his side. We sat in a private booth overlooking the dance floor. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple enjoying the night, but every move had a purpose. "Watch my men," Alec murmured, sliding his arm along the back of the booth. His breath brushed my hair as he leaned closer. "Tell me if any of them are acting strange." His hand rested lightly on my shoulder, warm enough to set my nerves on fire. I leaned toward him to whisper updates, my lips close to his ear. Each time I felt him tense just slightly, like he wasn't as unaffected as he pretended to be. Hours passed. Then I saw it. A bartender slipping into a back office too often. I whispered it into Alec's ear, and I felt his breath catch for just a second against my jaw. "We have what we need," he said, standing. His hand settled on the small of my back as he guided me out. Protective, possessive. In the SUV back to the mansion, his phone kept buzzing with updates. He finally turned to me. "You found our leak," he said. I expected satisfaction in his voice. But what I heard instead was something closer to pride, and that scared me more than the gunshots ever had. I didn't expect the guilt to hit the way it did. When Alec told me they'd found the burner phone in the bartender's locker, my stomach twisted. I knew what that meant. I knew what the Knights did to people who betrayed them. Yet as the SUV moved through the glowing Chicago streets, all I could think about was the man's face, the one I had just condemned without even knowing his name. "What will happen to him?" I asked quietly. Alec didn't answer right away. He watched me instead, studying every part of my expression as if he could read the truth inside me without needing words. "He'll be questioned," Alec finally said. "Thoroughly." The way he said thoroughly made my skin chill. The way his voice stayed calm made me realize this was normal for him, expected, routine. "And then," I whispered, "and then he'll face the consequences of his choices." I looked away, staring out the tinted window so he couldn't see my reaction. I didn't know why I cared. I didn't know why it bothered me so much that my skills, my attention to detail, could be used to ruin a life. Alec reached across the seat and took my hand gently, surprising me. "Does this change how you see me?" he asked. I looked down at our hands. His was steady and warm. Mine was cold. "It changes how I see myself," I said honestly. He squeezed my hand the way someone might steady a person standing on the edge of a cliff. "You're adapting," he said, "faster than you think." That scared me even more. 3 weeks passed, in a blur of lessons, meetings, and nights spent studying files with Alec. Every day I learned more about the world I'd stepped into. And every day, Alec stood a little closer, spoke a little softer, watched me a little longer. I felt myself changing. Not just in what I could do, but in what I was willing to accept. Then came the night Alec walked into my room with a file in his hand and a storm in his eyes. "We have a problem," he said. He placed photos on my desk, Rosettas, taken from odd angles, new staff members. Subtle changes I recognized immediately. "They've planted people there," I said. Alec nodded. "Paul Pirelli requested a meeting tomorrow night. He wants neutral ground." "Rosettas," I whispered. Alec's jaw tightened. "He thinks I'll show up and walk straight into his trap." I looked at the photos again, the faces, the layout, the staff movements, everything inside me twisted. "You're not going, right?" I asked. His silence was my answer. "Alec, they almost killed you last time," I said, stepping toward him. "This is insane." He moved forward until I felt the desk press into the back of my legs. "That's exactly why I have to go," he said softly. "Because if I don't, every other family will think I'm afraid." His hand came up, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. The softness of the gesture didn't match the danger of the moment. "I need you there," he said. Those words made my heart stumble. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because I trust you," he answered. "Because you see things no one else sees." He placed a small necklace on the desk, a delicate gold chain with a tiny pendant. "It's a panic button," he said. "Press it, and my team comes." I stared at it, then at him. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You want me to pretend to be a waitress again?" I asked. "For one night." I knew the risk. I knew the fear, but I nodded anyway. "Tomorrow night," I said. "I'll do it." The next night, Rosetta's looked exactly the same and nothing like the same. The chandeliers glowed, the tables gleamed, the staff smiled. But the air was heavy with danger. Every shadow felt sharp. I moved between tables with practiced ease, wearing a uniform that felt like a ghost from my past. My heart pounded every time someone looked at me too long. But no one seemed to recognize me. Or if they did, they kept it to themselves. Through the crack in the private dining room door, I saw Alec sitting across from Paul Pirelli. Paul's smile looked pleasant to anyone else, but I saw the poison underneath it. "Another bottle for the private room," the manager told me. I nodded and headed downstairs to the wine cellar. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Too soft. Too deliberate. Before I could turn, a hand clamped over my mouth. Another locked around my arms and pulled me backward into the shadows. "Hello, April," a familiar voice hissed. "We missed you upstairs." My blood froze. Jonah. Rosetta's former head bartender. A man I once trusted. "They're paying good money to know why Alec Knight values you," he whispered. I thrashed, panic exploding through me. I went limp, exactly the way Alec's security team taught me, throwing Jonah off balance. My elbow drove into his ribs. My heel slammed onto his foot. His grip loosened. I pressed the pendant at my throat. Upstairs, in the middle of his negotiation, Alec's phone buzzed. Paul's smile widened. "Your waitress discovered something," he taunted. Alec stood up slowly, the calm in his movements terrifying. "Taking her was the last mistake you'll ever make," he said. Down in the cellar, Jonah lunged at me with a knife. Wine bottles shattered as bullets exploded through the air. The world spun into chaos. Then strong arms wrapped around me. Alec pulled me hard against his chest. His breath was rough, his hands urgent. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, looking me over with fierce intensity. I shook my head, still trembling, still alive. The sight of Jonah's body on the floor didn't make me sick. It made me relieved. Alec lifted my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. "They were never after me tonight," he said. "They were after you." My heart dropped. "Why?" I whispered. His thumb brushed the edge of my jaw in a slow, possessive stroke. "Because you're valuable," he said softly. "To them." His hand slid to the back of my neck. "And to me." Something shifted between us then. Something dangerous. Something inevitable. Something I didn't know how to stop. Life inside the Knight estate changed overnight after the attack at Rosetta's. Guards doubled. Cameras were upgraded. Every window, every hallway, every entrance felt watched, protected, controlled, and so was I. Alec didn't let me out of his sight for days. He followed me into the study for strategy meetings. He stood outside the door while I showered. He walked me to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At first I thought it was just protection, but then I saw the way his jaw tightened every time someone looked at me for too long, the way he always kept a hand on my back or my arm, as if reminding me where I belonged. It was possessiveness disguised as safety, and I didn't push him away. Instead, I found myself leaning into him, trusting him, wanting him near. The war with the Pirellis escalated fast. Bombings, threats, nighttime chases through the city streets. We spent hours planning counter-moves, while the map of Chicago filled with new marks and new dangers. Every time Alec leaned over the table and brushed my shoulder with his, I felt that same fire inside me. One night after a long meeting, I stayed behind in the council room, staring at all the places on the map where I had unknowingly changed the course of this war. I traced the lines with my fingertip, feeling the weight of my choices. "This isn't what I thought my life would be," I murmured. Alec stepped behind me, his presence filling the room the way it always did, steady, demanding, impossible to ignore. "What did you think it would be?" he asked. I turned to face him. He was so close I could feel his breath. His eyes followed every move I made. "Not this," I said. "Not planning attacks on crime families or getting kidnapped in wine cellars." Alec's expression softened, just a little. "Do you regret it?" Quote. The question hit harder than I expected. He wasn't just asking about my choice to stay, he was asking about us. I swallowed, feeling my heart thump painfully inside my chest. "No," I said, "I don't regret any of it." Alec didn't hesitate, not for a second. His hands came up to my face, pulling me into a kiss that consumed every thought in my head. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was claiming. It was everything he had held back since the night I whispered in his ear. I kissed him back with the same fire, grabbing his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space between us. When he finally broke away, our foreheads resting together, his voice was low and raw. "I can't offer you normal, April." "I stopped wanting normal the night I warned you," I whispered. From that moment on, everything between us changed. We worked side by side as the war unfolded across the city. The Knights struck Pirelli operations with precision, shutting down warehouses, intercepting shipments, crippling businesses. But Paul Pirelli fought back harder than anyone expected, dragging allies into the conflict and threatening to set the entire city on fire. Then one night, Dawn Knight called an emergency meeting. Paul had demanded a sit-down with all 5 Chicago families. "It's another trap," Alec said, "just like Rosetta's, only bigger." The room fell silent. Then I spoke. "There's a way to control this," I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. "We host the meeting," I continued, "at Rosetta's. But this time, it belongs to the Knights. Neutral ground under our rules, your security, your staff, your terms." Alex stared at me like he was seeing something new, something powerful. Dawn Knight nodded slowly. "Make the arrangements." And just like that, my idea became the center of Chicago's most dangerous negotiation. Rosetta's reopening was fast, flawless, and filled with hidden safeguards. New staff trained for both service and security. Reinforced walls. Safe exits disguised as storage rooms. Every detail was perfect. The night of the meeting, every major crime family walked through Rosetta's doors. The air was thick with tension. No one knew if they would walk out alive. Alex stood beside me at the entrance, his hand resting lightly on my lower back. A gesture that told the entire room exactly who I belonged to. Paul Pirelli arrived last. His eyes dragged over me with mocking curiosity. "From Waitress to whatever this is," he said. Before Alec could react, I smiled politely. "Tonight I'm just your hostess, Mr. Pirelli." Quote. His smirk faded. Inside the dining room, the families made their accusations, their demands, their threats. And while they talked, I watched their guards move around the room, just a little too coordinated. They were planning something. When I passed behind Paul's chair to refill his glass, I bent close enough for only him to hear. "I know about the snipers across the street," I whispered calmly. "And the men you hid in the kitchen." His hand froze mid-reach. Panic flashed in his eyes. Then everything happened fast. Night security moved with brutal precision, exposing every hidden weapon, every planted threat. Paul's ambush collapsed before he could utter a command. He didn't walk out of Rosetta's in handcuffs or in a body bag. He walked out humiliated. And in our world, humiliation was worse than death. 3 months later, Paul was removed by his own family. The Pirellis negotiated peace. Violence dropped across the city. Rosetta's became known as neutral ground. My vision, Alec's power, night protection. Alec was named the new head of the family, and I was officially placed at his right hand. One evening, he took me on a walk along the lake, the sky fading pink behind him. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just the family, me." Before I could answer, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. My breath caught. Inside was an emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. Bold, unusual, beautiful. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She was the only one who could manage my grandfather." I laughed softly. "Are you asking me to manage you?" He stepped closer, his hands sliding around my waist. "I'm asking you to be my partner, in all of it. The business, the future, my life." My chest tightened, my heart steadied. The decision felt both impossible and inevitable. "Yes," I said. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, sealing every promise between us. Weeks later, we stood inside Rosetta's, not as Waitress and Mafia heir, but as husband and wife, surrounded by allies and enemies alike. Alec leaned down and whispered against my ear. "You changed my fate the moment you whispered that warning." Quote. I looked around the restaurant where everything began and understood something simple and true. I wasn't the frightened waitress anymore. I was the woman who stood beside the most powerful man in Chicago. Because I chose to whisper instead of walk away.